Yo, what is up guys, Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So of course tomorrow night we have the Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou fight. Now I haven't had time to really preview that fight, quite frankly, but there are a couple of fights on the undercard that I'm really looking forward to, that I think are really good fights. One of which is Israil Madrimov versus Magomed Kurbanov. Now this fight is for the vacant WBA super welterweight title, of course formerly held by Jermell Charlo. Jermell Charlo was the undisputed champion, however now his titles are being vacated or stripped, whatever. He's been inactive, he hasn't defended his titles. So here we are, we have a vacant title fight between Magomed Kurbanov and Israil Madrimov. Really interesting fight in my opinion. Sometimes when you get these vacant title fights, it's set up for one guy to win. You know, you'll get one guy who's highly touted against a guy who isn't so much. For me, this fight is evenly matched. Both guys are unbeaten, and both guys have fought in and around top 10 level at super welterweight. Also, both guys have contrasting styles. Israil Madrimov, of course, hailing from Uzbekistan, is a more athletic fighter, a much more explosive fighter, more offensively creative, I would say, but a bigger risk taker. Kurbanov is more technical in his approach. He'll mix things up. He likes to get behind his jab, throw straight punches. He actually likes to get behind a shoulder roll, which is quite unusual for a Eastern European fighter. It's clear that Kurbanov has watched a lot of Floyd Mayweather. You can see that in his style, that side-on kind of Philly shell style that he sometimes uses. But he's got a good jab, he's got a good straight right hand. He's decent at boxing from range. I think where he kind of struggles is when he's boxing up close. Because of that side-on style, that shoulder roll style, at times he does invite pressure on himself. We saw that in the Liam Smith fight, which was really close. That fight could have gone either way. Kurbanov won the decision, but I felt Kurbanov made that fight harder for himself than it should have been, because when he was boxing and moving, he was outboxing Liam Smith, but he was giving Liam Smith too many opportunities to close that distance and work up close, and as a result it made the fight very close. For me, in this fight, Kurbanov has to be boxing and moving behind the jab. Madrimov's a guy who primarily, he can box going backwards, he's got the athleticism to do so, but he's much more comfortable when he's sitting down on his punches, letting his hands go, throwing crazy combinations, leading with uppercuts, leading with hooks. Like I said, Madrimov is a very creative fighter offensively, he takes a lot of risks, and primarily he likes to apply pressure. He likes to fight on the front foot. So I want to see less of that kind of side-on style from Kurbanov in this fight, where he's kind of stationary but side-on, inviting pressure on himself, because if he does that against Madrimov, it could lead to his undoing. One thing about Madrimov is he's got a good left hook, which against a Philly shell, that side-on Philly shell can be very effective. I think Madrimov is somewhat open to that shot when he's in that stance. Again, we saw that against Liam Smith. So for me, Madrimov needs to make the most of his boxing ability, his technical ability, by keeping it long, by keeping behind the jab. But he needs to be moving a lot more in this fight, making Madrimov chase the fight essentially. I don't want to see him make himself an easy target by not using his feet. I think that'll be a terrible idea for Kurbanov, because if he engages in that sort of fight, don't get me wrong, Kurbanov can pick some sneaky uppercut counters from that Philly shell, pull overhand right counter. He's got some good shots when he fights out of that shell, but it's very low. It's very low output, and he doesn't hit the hardest. So I think he'd be overwhelmed by Madrimov if he invites that pressure onto himself. Madrimov's a much harder puncher. He mixes his combinations up. He can throw in bunches as well. If yeah, if he invites Madrimov onto himself by standing side on in the Philly shell without moving, he might get swamped. So for me, Madrimov needs to be moving in this bout. Because we saw against Michel Soro that if you keep distance against Madrimov, you can have success against him. If you maintain that distance, you can win rounds based on that jab. And Michel Soro was doing that against Madrimov in their first fight until he got controversially stopped. And I think Kurbanov may be best suited to look at that first Michel Soro fight and build on that, Madrimov's fight with Soro. Having said that, Soro arguably beat Kurbanov in Kurbanov's last fight. He fought Kurbanov quite recently, and most people felt Soro beat Kurbanov. However, Soro is nothing like Madrimov. I think that was a stylistic issue for Kurbanov. But Kurbanov can fight a little like Soro, who gave Madrimov trouble. And I think that's the approach he needs to take in this bout. As for Madrimov, Madrimov's a guy who I rate in a sense. I rate him in the sense that I feel he's got a lot of raw potential. He can throw every single shot in the book. He's got power. He's got explosiveness. He's got decent speed. Madrimov has that Uzbeki style, or Uzbekistanian style, where you can clearly tell a lot of these guys have talent, a lot of ability, a lot of raw ability, and they come with their own style. But for me, sometimes with these Uzbek fighters, it seems like they're fighting off instinct more so than a cohesive plan, if that makes sense. That's the impression I get with a lot of these Uzbek fighters. I feel the same about MJ Akhmadaliev, you know. I feel he has a lot of talents, but in-ring IQ, boxing IQ, I'm not quite convinced it's there. And I feel the same way about Madrimov. I see a lot of wasted movement with these guys, doing things that don't really make sense. They look flashy, they look snazzy, but they're not really effective, and as a result, these guys are using a lot of unnecessary movement, whereas Kurbanov doesn't. So, from a in-ring IQ point of view, a boxing IQ point of view, I do think Kurbanov is more advanced. However, I believe Madrimov is more naturally talented. He's got more raw potential. And I believe that will be the difference in this fight. I believe Kurbanov will give Madrimov issues with his boxing ability, with his jab. But for some reason, I believe the physicality, the athleticism, the explosiveness, and the power of Madrimov will see him win this fight. I think it's well matched though. I think it's really evenly matched. And like I was saying, it's good to see a vacant title contested between two guys who are both unbeaten. There's no super clear favourite here, in my opinion at least. Maybe I'd favour Madrimov, but not by a lot. Would I be surprised if Kurbanov won this fight? Not really. Both guys have a lot to prove as of right now, but both guys have shown some ability in their careers. Both guys have been on the come-up, so it's refreshing to see a vacant title being contested between two up-and-comers, two contenders who are relatively well matched, instead of giving somebody a free title. Now, it may end out that one of these guys gets blown away, but on paper, this should be competitive. Anyway, share your thoughts below. What do you make of this fight? Beanie Guy Del Boy, peace.